Hey, good morning. I'm Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and I'm excited to be here for the next hour with you. It is Wednesday, May 7th. This is not the first, no, this is the first May livecast of 2025, and I'm happy to be here for the next hour and answer your questions, to discuss a wide variety of random topics, talk a little bit about Stonemaier Games and games in general. Let's start out with a treat of the day. I see LB, Jeeper, Melissa, and Garrett joining us with comments right off the bat. And today's treat of the day for me is actually one that I've already eaten, but I wanted to mention it because a supporter of Stonemaier Games, Chad, recently went to Scotland, and Chad was very kind to spot this chocolate bar, which you can see is empty because I've eaten it. This dark chocolate with Scottish whiskey in it. I guess Chad must have been at Stirling Castle in Scotland, and he saw this chocolate bar. He thought of me, which was so incredibly kind because I love chocolate, especially dark chocolate. Thank you, Chad. And Chad sent it to the Stonemaier Games co-working space where I ended up getting this chocolate bar and really enjoyed it. So thank you, Chad, for this. I really appreciate it. And yeah, that is my treat of the day. Let me know if you are indulging in some way today that brings you joy. This is, I've already eaten the chocolate bar. I loved it. That is my treat of the day. Melissa says that she already had her chocolate chip cookie. That does sound delicious, Melissa. I'm going to try something different today. I want to, if I remember, I have several questions for you, and I'm going to try to put them on the screen. I think I can do that. I think maybe I can post them as comments. So let's try. Let me try one question of the day today. I have game night snacks in the title here. So I'm going to type, what is your favorite game night snack that you can buy at the grocery store? I'm hosting game night tonight, and let's see if I can post that, and I'll put that on the screen. I'll post it twice here. There we go. So that is my first question for you all today. I'm asking because I am going to the grocery store today. I'm hosting game night tonight. I don't really want to spend time preparing a treat, but I'm happy to pick up something from the grocery store today. Oftentimes we have like little chocolates or treats like that, but right now we happen to not have anything like that, and so I need to pick something up for game night tonight from the grocery store. So let me know in the comments what your favorite game night snack is that you can buy at the grocery store, and perhaps I will get it for my game night tonight. I'll leave that on the screen for a moment while I scroll through for other questions. Nate says, can you post the links to your interviews about tariffs? I actually don't have a link to the BBC one, Nate, and I don't have one. I haven't seen the one from the long conversation I had with AP News or CNET yet. Those are the two where I've had long conversations but haven't actually seen the articles. But if you look at my post from last week, Nate, and well, you know where to find it. It's on the Stonemaier Games blog. I've added links to the bottom of that post. Go to the website version of that, not the Facebook version. Go to the website, go to the blog, and go to the bottom of that article, the most recent article about tariffs, which was how can we fix this together? And you can see the links, the related links that I've accumulated so far. I'm hoping to add a few more to that in the near future. One link that you can also find, and I'll pull up my other screen here so I can show you where this is. Okay, I'll show you where this is. If you go to, I'm going to share my other screen here. Here's my other screen. I'll full screen it. Here we go. If you go to our website, there's a podcast that I was on recently that was not about tariffs. In fact, it was the opposite of tariffs. It was a really joyful, delightful conversation with Steph, whose podcast is called That Quirky Bird Girl. And so I got to join Steph for a conversation on her podcast recently. And if you want to find it, or if you want to find other chats that I have, and I guess I don't put everything here because I didn't put the CNN chats, but if you go to About and then go to Staff and Contributors on our website, and then you click my name right here, then you can see various interviews that I've had that aren't game specific typically. If I mention that here, game specific interviews are found on the corresponding media page for each game, but you can see various chats. And if you want to check out the recent chat that I had with That Quirky Bird Girl, you can also search like Spotify for That Quirky Bird Girl. We had a really delightful chat. I had emailed a little bit with Steph about birds and running a game company, things like that. But I had never talked to her before, and it was a delightful conversation that actually moved me to tears at one point. So feel free to check out that podcast if you are ready for emotional Jamey, because he comes through in this podcast. Let's see. Jeff is getting excited about Geekway to the West. He says, the fact that Geekway is next week is helping me forget about the pain of the Blues game Sunday. Also super excited I get to help out at the Stonemaier Games booth. Jeff, I'm, again, really sorry about the Blues, and I'm really appreciative that you're helping out at the Stonemaier Games booth. I'm looking forward to playing some games with you. I see some suggestions here for game night bits: sourdough pretzel bits, dried mango, skinny pop and chocolate-covered raisins, popcorn, Twizzlers, seasonal ginger snaps. I like seasonal stuff, Nate. I see a veggie tray. Leslie going healthy. I like that. Lots of good suggestions here. Yeah. Jeff goes St. Louis pizza and wings, then a fruit tray and something sweet. So very elaborate, Jeff, for your game nights. A little messy there too. Chips, lots of different things about that. Justin says, has the tariff fallout affected how many copies of Vantage you plan to have at Gen Con? I'm going and really hoping to get a copy there. Great question, Justin. The tariffs, the way I phrase it is, I've been working on Vantage for 8 years. I'm not going to, for a decision that was made a month ago, I'm not letting it impact our rollout of Vantage. Well, it'll cost us a considerable amount of money, but we're moving forward with Vantage. Production is completing pretty much right now, and it will start to freight ship to our fulfillment centers. And then we have a second wave of the first print run shipping in June, and that one should be ready for Gen Con. It won't impact the quantity, and we do still plan to. We were selling these copies essentially to MeepleSource, and MeepleSource is selling them through our co-hosted booth at Gen Con. So yes, you should definitely be able to get. I don't want to say definitely yet because the freight shipment hasn't arrived, but and who knows what will happen at ports due to all the tariff stuff over the next month or so. But yes, we are planning to have it at Gen Con with no disruption from tariffs that we have control over, at least. Yeah, good question. See Solomon joining us from Malaysia here. Lots of other suggestions about game night treats, game night snacks. That's one of the topics today. Let's talk about the other topics in the subject line. Top 3 media pairings. So this topic is one that was brought up by one of the panelists that joins me for many of our top 10 lists. Over the last 6 months, whenever I have a top 10 topic for the Stonemaier Games YouTube channel, I send that question out to people who have they have very different gaming methods than I do. We have Erin, who talks about solo gaming. We have Abigail, talks about digital gaming. That's her primary way of playing games. Skylar plays games with her family primarily. And Carrie plays really heavy games typically. So I asked these panelists for their opinions. And this question came up from Skylar. She asked, have you ever intentionally paired some other form of media, like a book, a movie, a TV show, a digital game? Have you ever paired that with a tabletop game? Like, you're getting ready to play X game, and so you decide to read Y book because they're related to one another. And in repeating this question to the other panelists, I added the caveat that we were going to avoid intellectual properties because my instinctive answer was, when I played the Dune game for the first time, Dune Imperium, I wanted to also read the Dune book. But we excluded intellectual properties. And here are the top answers from our amazing panelists. Let's start with Skylar, because it was Skylar's idea. Skylar's number one pick was pairing the game Planet Unknown with the Lost in Space TV series, the more recent one. I think Skylar mentions it started in 2018. She says, we love the Lost in Space TV series. It is a fun ride as characters explore distant worlds and struggle together as a family. It pairs beautifully with the game Planet Unknown as you get to explore a world and have your own rovers. We love that Planet Unknown plays with up to 6 with lots of simultaneous play to keep things moving. Highly recommend pairing these two together. And again, Skylar is our family gamer. This was her family game pick. Erin is our solo gamer. And Erin says that they've paired Sleeping Gods with The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, a very specific Zelda game. Aaron says, in open sea, puzzles and enemies await you in both of these titles. The sense of freedom, as well as making the player feel clever, makes these two games a perfect pair. So pairing Sleeping Gods with the digital game, Legend of Zelda, we have Planet Unknown paired with a TV series. And then we have Carrie, our heavy gamer, says, Carrie picked Obsession and pairs it with Victorian-era classical music. It adds immersion to an already thematic game and adds even more whimsy to the courtship. So Carrie actually picked something that combines in the moment while you're actually playing the game. So I'm curious if you have had anything like this, where you've played a game and it has made you want to want to experience a similar media to that game, to maybe the theme of that game, or vice versa, where you've just decided, okay, this month I'm going to play this game a few times and I'm going to read this book while I'm doing so. Yeah, let me know about that in the comments here. I see. So here's a game night snack question. Monkey Butler Lab says, do you trust your fellow gamers to wipe clean their fingers, or do you need dry snacks? I generally prefer non-messy snacks at game night. Things that you can maybe pick up a few of and enjoy them, maybe put it on a napkin. And yeah, that's generally my preference at game night. A few people have mentioned pretzels. Grayson explains why here. They're not sugary, they're not sticky or greasy, keeps the game clean. The Costco peanut butter pretzels if I'm feeling wild. Yeah, I'm curious if I know my grocery store has pretzels. I don't know if they have the peanut butter filled pretzels though. Horde of the Board says, I'm trying to design my own board game. What would you advise me when getting to roadblocks? How do I map the beginning, middle, and end of designing a board game? Any tips are welcome. That's a big question. Obviously, I have a lot of resources about this on the Stonemaier Games website that you can check out. Let me focus on your first question. I think that's one that I can answer somewhat succinctly. What would you advise me when getting to roadblocks? Two things. I would advise you to do two things when you reach a roadblock, something that I do all the time when I am designing a game. In fact, just recently I got blind playtesting feedback back for a game that I'm working on. And it is a real puzzle for me to figure this out. I reached some of these roadblocks yesterday while thinking through this feedback. And one thing that I find helps is for me to always be working on, or try to be working on, two different games. I really find that when I reach a roadblock in game A, if I have game B to switch over to for even just a few days, it can kind of reset my framework for looking at game A. So by switching to another game for a little bit and switching off my brain, which is kind of stuck on this roadblock, it helps me when I come back to game A. That's one thing. The second thing is when I reach a roadblock, I often just go research other games in the genre, whether they are mechanically similar or thematically similar. Watch some top 10 videos, just read some blog posts about it, some articles, listen to some podcasts. Just doing that and seeing how other designers have puzzled their way through a game with some key similarity really does help me with those roadblocks. So I'd recommend trying that if you have experienced some roadblocks. I'm open to any other feedback that people have in the comments about about roadblocks they've encountered while designing games. Let Horde of the Board know in the comments what you think. Gemma says, get you in the summer team to Tabletop Scotland. We'd adore you to visit us. Is that a specific convention in Scotland or just the general idea of playing games in Scotland? I'm open to either of those, Gemma. I have been to Ireland, Wales, and England, but I have not been to Scotland. So that is the one place, unless I'm forgetting some other place, I guess Northern Ireland. But yeah, I've been to Southern Ireland. I need to go to Scotland, and I appreciate that invitation. And yeah, let me know if that's a specific convention, because I'm always looking for good conventions to attend worldwide in unique places that I haven't been before in particular. Philippe says, I spoke with other companies about the tariffs. Are you able to ship, for example, directly from China to Canada to avoid prices going up there? Philippe, we've done this for many, many years now. Yeah, it's been over a decade that whenever we complete a project in China, we work with a company called Panda there. We ship the games directly to our fulfillment centers and often directly to distributors in Canada, Australia, the US, and Europe. So that's something that we've been doing for a long, long time. In that way, the tariffs do not impact our prices to non-US customers. And we're hoping to have them have a very minimal impact on US customers too. but we want to be transparent about that. We want to let customers know how much the tariffs impact the cost of making games in China. But we also don't want to increase those prices in the US more than would cause a huge burden on customers. It's a tough balance there. Garrett, who has helped out immensely with Vantage, says the fact that I'll be able to play a physical version of Vantage hopefully by the end of summer is so surreal to me. I have my copy on my desk right here, Garrett. It's been sitting here for quite some time, and it's surreal to me too. And Garrett has playtested Vantage many times on the digital prototyping app that Ira developed for Vantage. But Vantage is not a digital game, so we needed to playtest it digitally because Vantage has so many cards. It would be close to impossible for a playtester to print out that many cards. And it's a very different experience. It is a different experience to play on the tabletop. In my opinion, a much better experience to play with actual cards than on the screen. So I'm very excited for you to experience that, Garrett. All right, the other topic that I have today in the subject line is, oh, here's Chad. Chad was the one who shared the chocolate. Thank you, Chad, for chiming in today, and thank you so much for the chocolate. Really, it was very delicious. I really appreciate it. The other topic in the subject line today is Dropout. I have many other topics to talk about today, but this was one that I wanted to mention because I recently talked to a friend about Dropout TV. I'm talking about the streaming service Dropout. And I'm just delighted by this streaming service. I'm very new to it. I have only, up until very recently, I'd only seen like clips on YouTube from mostly their Game Changers show. And a friend decided, I was talking to a friend about it, how much I loved it. This friend I knew loved it. That's why I was talking about it with her. And she was very kind, and she gifted me a 3-month subscription to Dropout TV. Dropout.tv? Dropout? We'll call it Dropout. And over the last couple of days, I've been watching some of the current season of Game Changers, and it is so delightful and so funny. I find it incredibly funny. If you don't know what it is this specific show, Game Changers, is a game show where the entire premise of the show is different every time they play. And so the contestants learn the rules for that particular episode as they play. So one of the episodes this season is an episode where the contestants literally had a year to complete a variety of different challenges, and the show itself is showing what they did with those challenges. There's another one called the U-Olympics, where the contestants compete in a variety of competitions, and then they compete against their previous score in that competition. And then the most recent one was it was about like sincere responses to fun questions. And what was it called? Yeah, I'm using the wrong word instead of sincere, but sincere is the idea, because usually contestants are joking around, they're doing bits and whatnot. And in this episode, they tried to ask them for very sincere answers. And it was still very amusing, but also kind of touching and moving because of their sincere answers. Just a really clever show. I'm loving it. I love that a friend gifted it to me, and I will continue to subscribe after that as well. And I was curious if any of you have dove into the world of Dropout TV. I am really enjoying it so far. I see some great answers about thematic pairings as well here. Jeff pairs space-themed games with music from the Metroid video game series. Kondar had a Japanese cherry blossom ambiance on while playing Tokaido. That's clever to have the whole ambiance, not just sound, but also aesthetics. Charcuterie boards for game nights. That can tie actually to the game Charcuterie if you want. Jamey plays viticulture with wine. Classic pairing there for viticulture. Pairing a game with a food or drink. I love doing that. I've definitely done that many times. I think it's much less often that I paired media with a tabletop game. Garrett had the reverse happen. He watched Bridgerton and made him want to watch Obsession. I've definitely had that happen, Garrett. I'm glad you mentioned that, where you've been consuming some form of other media, and that makes you want to play a game that's somewhat related to that media. Some great suggestions here in the comments. I won't show all of them, but if you want to look at the comments, there's some fun suggestions here. Nicole mentions playing Fado music while playing House of Fado. I can relate to that because I very recently played House of Fado, but we didn't have the music on. Some games that I played recently, as I'm looking through all these, I played Scythe this past weekend with some friends, and I was playing at a friend's house. You may have seen this on Instagram, but I was playing at a friend's house, and I didn't know which faction I was going to have, but I have several Scythe faction-specific shirts, so I just wore multiple layers of Scythe shirts in preparation to hopefully have one of those factions, which I didn't end up having. I had the Albion faction, and I was planning to then strip off all the other shirts and just wear that one shirt. But it was a little cold. It was kind of a cold, rainy day in St. Louis, and so I just kept all my shirts on anyway. But it was fun to plan ahead for that, just in case. I also played Apiary on Board Game Arena. Played that last week at Board Game Arena game night. That was a lot of fun. I played, what was the other game I played this weekend? I played So Clover in addition to Scythe. And I played on May the 4th, I played the Star Wars deck building game with Megan. As usual, she crushed me. Megan is very good at deck building games. What did you all play on the 4th? Did you do anything or did you do anything Star Wars related on the 4th? We watched Andor, the latest season, and we played Star Wars, the deck building game. Jeremy says, have you seen the Dragon Shield board game sleeves commercial? It makes me laugh and fits the snack topic. I've not seen that, Jeremy, but I will try to find that. Yeah, that sounds great. Hilda says that one of her former movie podcast partners and I are working on a podcast with these types of pairings in mind, combining books, games, movies, and shows. Ooh, that's fun, Hilda. You have to share the name of the podcast when that goes live so that people, especially Skylar, who came up with this topic, can join the conversation, hear what your pairings are for that. Looks like Variable Toast 52 introduced some games that are new to the hobby to Finspan last night. They all loved it and all asked to play the rest of the series now. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing Finspan with them. And I'm glad I got them excited to try the other games, Wingspan and Wormspan, in the Span series of games. Okay, Gemma clarifies, Tabletop Scotland, it is a convention, is the third largest convention in the UK, first weekend in September at Edinburgh. I will add that to my list of conventions to someday attend, and hopefully not all that far in the future. So Tabletop Scotland in September. September is a busy time for us. Usually that is the time of the year when we have the Stonemaier Games Design Day, and it's also the time of the year where I have a big group of nerdy, delightfully nerdy, geeky friends. They have a weekend designing around being nerdy and geeky together, and that is usually around that time of year too. But it is a great time of year for conventions as well. Usually a beautiful time of the year. So I will have to think about that in the future, Gemma. Thank you for that recommendation. Christopher says, have you ever had a game that you adore, but it just doesn't work with your core group? I am contemplating acquiring a game for the third time and diving into solo mode. Chris, that is a fun question. I'm curious if anyone else has an answer to that as well. I'm sure I do. Let me look at my shelf. Part of it, I would say, as I'm looking at my shelf here, I'm looking at Tzolk'in, for example. I love the game Tzolk'in. And I know there are people in my group who enjoy Tzolk'in, but it sometimes is harder to get honestly, at game night, it is sometimes harder to get older games to the table. As much as I love them, and as much as it is delightful to kind of just slip into a game that you know really, really well with other people who know that game really well. But I would say game nights, that is when like the cult of the new often takes over, at least in my gaming groups, where we're really excited to get something new to the table. So that can be a challenge, I think, with not as much about the people as it is about older games, I would say, in my group. Sandy says, Tabletop Scotland is in Edinburgh, where I live. You're welcome to crash in mine, Jamie. Oh, thank you, Sandy. I really appreciate that. And another reason to come to Tabletop Scotland. Oh, here's Skylar joining in. Skylar, who came up with this wonderful topic. Skylar says, when I was thinking of media pairings, I thought of the Italian Job movie and the board game Bad Company, knowing you enjoy heist-themed things. Thank you, Skylar, for thinking of me with that. I do love heist-themed fiction of any kind and heist-themed board games. And actually tied to that, Skylar, I'm glad you mentioned this. I recently read a book called The Rom-Commers. One of my favorite genres of movies are rom-coms. I really, really love romantic comedies. I'm willing to give almost any romantic comedy a chance. And yet it's mostly just been movies, maybe a few TV shows, but mostly movies. I don't think I've ever read until recently a book that was also a rom-com, but I read a book called The Rom-Commers recently, very recently, and loved it. I was delighted by it for all the same reasons that I love rom-com movies, except that it's almost even better because a book gives you a little bit more time to flesh out why the characters actually like each other, which is maybe one of my biggest issues with rom-com movies. As much as I love them, I'm also very picky about them. Because oftentimes you see like one good conversation between the people who are falling in love with one another, and so you don't fully understand why they really like each other. But in book form, you have plenty of time to see that. And now I know that I love this new genre of book, rom-com novels, and so I want to discover more of those, not just romantic and not just comedic. I want both of them. I want the romanticism and the comedic elements combined. Just like in the best rom-com movies. So if any of you have any novels, rom-com novels that you would highly recommend, let me know. I'd love to check them out. Tim says, is there a board game based on electing a new pope? Not that I'm aware of, but it sounds like a board game topic that could have been in place, that could exist somewhere. Josh says, what are some of your favorite games without expansions that you would love to play an expansion for? Interesting question, Josh, because usually when I love a game, it's because I don't necessarily I don't feel the need for more stuff for that game. Well, let's look at my shelf over here. Let's look at a game that doesn't have an expansion that I would gladly add an expansion for. I'm looking at, off the cuff, I'm seeing Let's Go to Japan. Plenty of replayability in the core box. And that's one of the reasons why I often don't think about expansions for games that I already love, because I already feel like there's a lot of stuff in the core box. But Let's Go to Japan, I wouldn't mind adding another city to it. There's Tokyo, there's Kyoto, two cities that I know pretty well from living in Japan. So I would love to have a city that I don't know as well added to Let's Go to Japan. Let's see if there's any others that jump out from my shelf over here. I've seen a lot of games that I have that do have expansions, and some games that I feel like I haven't played enough yet to want expansions. Even Creature Caravan, a game that I really, really love, I have the expansion in the box and haven't added it to the game yet because I feel like I still have a lot to discover from the core game itself. But that is a fun question. Anyone else? Do you have an answer for that, Josh, or anyone else watching? Horde of the Board says, when is Vantage coming out? When can I order it, and when is delivery? Everything is currently still an estimate, but the current estimate for Vantage is that it will be ready for people to, it will have arrived at our fulfillment centers, and thus will be ready for people to order on our web store in early July. Probably the second week of July is what I'm aiming for right now. Same question for Monkey Butler Labs. Yeah, I don't have an official sale date yet because Vantage has not left. We haven't received it at fulfillment centers yet. That is the only time that I'll have an official sale time, when I know that it has arrived or is almost about to arrive at every fulfillment center. But if you want to stay on touch with Vantage news, please subscribe to the Vantage newsletter. That is where I keep this type of thing up to date. You're always welcome to ask here too, but you can check out that newsletter. And if you don't want to subscribe to yet another newsletter, I do archive it on the Stonemaier Games website on the main page for Vantage. I will show you where that is right now. Let's go over to the Vantage main page. Here's our website. Here's the Vantage page of our website. And this is for all of our games that have game-specific newsletters. You can go down the Vantage page and see all updates right here, where you can click on it and see the latest update right there. So you don't even have to subscribe to anything. Yeah. What else? I know I have more questions here, but let me throw out another topic at you. Actually, let me throw out my second question of the day, and you can start to think about it if you'd like. What else do you want to know about tariffs? The least fun topic that's been on our minds for a while now, but it is an important one. Let's see if I can put the comment on the screen so you all can see it. Here we go. Here's the question. What else do you want to know about tariffs is my other question. And I asked this because I have another article brewing about tariffs, which currently are 145% on all exports from China to the US, paid by companies that import things that are made in China. So when Stonemaier Games in the very near future starts to receive some shipments for things that we made in China, we will not only pay the $10 per game that we spent making the game, but we'll also pay another $14.50 to the US government just to bring that game into the US. This is for US things made in China that are brought into the US with the expense paid by companies, US companies mostly. if you have any questions about tariffs that I have not answered in previous articles, or that just you want another answer to, let me know in the comments here, and I will consider answering them in the upcoming article that I'm working on. Now let me scroll back and see some things that I missed. Here is a question. Bob King says, what tools do you use for information management? For example, when you added that tabletop skyline to your list, I was curious where you added it. Good question, Bob. I should have mentioned I was adding it to Trello. I use, so the things that I have pinned in my Chrome taskbar are Trello. Trello is a list making app. I have that pinned. I have Discord, not really for information management. I use a lot of Google Sheets. So I have a big checklist that is available on for sharing on the Stonemaier Games website. It's on an article from a while ago. If you look up the word checklist, you might find it. I use, for project management, I use this big Google Sheet for tracking our different projects. And for shared project management, I use Basecamp, something called Basecamp that I share with my coworkers for different projects. Horde of the Board says, Vantage was a game long time coming. Do you have any other games that have been in the pipeline that long, or will you ever do such a long development for a game? I hope not. No, I don't have anything else that's been in the works for 8 years or that has ever taken that long. Yeah. Mike says, do you play on a gaming table or just on a regular table? I do play on a gaming table that I got years ago from what was called boardgametables.com. Now they're called All Play. I believe I have their Jasper table, I think is the one that I have. Ooh, Ray's talking mocktails, talking my language, Ray. I made a homemade mocktail last week that you might enjoy. Homemade honey ginger syrup, water, honey, and a few slices of ginger root heated together, poured over ice with soda mineral water. Simple, but very delicious. That does sound very delicious. Sounds, yeah, right up my alley. I like putting, there's actually a mocktail that I make that uses a fake whiskey combined with honey. And I don't know if I actually put ginger syrup in it, but I really like that addition. Uses honey, uses some, actually, no, it uses ginger beer. That's why I haven't put ginger syrup in it. I really like ginger beer in cocktails and mocktails, just a little splash because it is very, very sweet. Here's a rom-com book from Ian who has some good recommendations in the past. Finding Mr. Right by Kelly Armstrong. I will make a note of this. And Bob, I read on a Kindle, and so I'm going to use Amazon to look this up. I don't have a list making app. Actually, I use Google Docs to track all the books that I read, all the shows that I watch, and all the movies, books, and shows. I track that on a Google Sheet as well. Finding Mr. Right. Here we go. Thank you for that recommendation, Ian. I really like, so I know there's many downsides to Amazon, but I really like having a Kindle. I like having so many books in one place, and I like that I can deliver a sample right away to my Kindle. I really like that. That way I can get a little taste for the writing style to see if it's a good fit for me. Here's another one. Garrett says, The Brown Sisters Trilogy. The Brown Sisters Trilogy. Okay, here we go. Starting with Get a Life, Chloe Brown. Thank you, Garrett, for this recommendation. I will check that out. It is a romantic comedy, according to Amazon. Not that I don't trust Garrett's recommendation. Thank you for that recommendation. Tomas says, what are the chances of winning the lawsuit against the president? It's really against the entire administration, not the, I know I put a flashy title saying we're suing the president, who is part of the current administration. How do you see board game manufacturing? Well, what are the chances of winning this lawsuit? I can answer that. I don't know, but I think the premise of the lawsuit is very strong, which is that tariffs are a tax, are the responsibility of Congress. That is very clear in the Constitution, that taxes are the responsibility and the authority of Congress. And there are exceptions to that are related to urgent matters in the world. And oftentimes this has equated to sanctions. The president has the power to implement sanctions against other countries using the IEEPA, which is this emergency act, the emergency powers that the president can enact. But the argument that we are making is that there is not an emergency happening. There are important things happening in the world. In fact, there are terrible things happening in the world right now, including some attacks against Pakistan recently by India. I mean, there's many terrible things happening worldwide, but they aren't emergencies for the U.S. They are things for us to deal with, and things for every country to really talk about and deal with. But they aren't actual emergencies that justify tariffs. So I think I don't know how the courts will respond. The lawsuit is being filed in the court, or has been filed in the Court of International Trade. The lawyers are hoping that it will go to the Supreme Court. I have no idea how the courts will actually rule on it, but the courts do seem to, or the Supreme Court at least, seems to look at the Constitution quite a bit. And so I think if they look at the Constitution, it is very clear that tariffs are the power of Congress, not the president. Here's some other recommendations. Hilda recommends Emily Henry books. And I believe the first recommendation from Ian was an Emily Henry book. Let's see. Finding Mr. Right. Oh, that was from Kelly Armstrong. No, that wasn't right. Do you have a specific book, Hilda, to recommend from Emily Henry? Hedge loves Dropout as well. My number one recommended game changer episode is Escape the Green Room. Or green, yeah, I think green room is what you meant to type there. That sounds delightful. Do you know what season that was by any chance? I have now completed everything that's available for season 7, so I'm going to work back, probably go back to season 6 and so far. Keith says, would you be so generous to show us your game shelf? Keith, I can't do it with the camera that I'm working on a desktop right now, so I can't really move the camera easily. But let's see if I can take a photo of it and I can hold that up to the screen. Here's my game shelf. And oftentimes I post photos on Instagram of the game shelf, and I will hold that photo up to the screen. Let's see if this works. I don't think I have any spoilers in here. Probably do, but I don't know if you can actually see it. Here's my game shelf, Keith. There's what my shelf looks like. I know you can't really see specifics on that shelf, but every once in a while on Instagram, I will post my current shelfie. In fact, I think on a recent Saturday, on Saturdays I post photos of Walter, our cat. On a recent Saturday, I think I posted a photo of Walter next to my shelf. So Keith, if you go to @Jamey Stonemaier on Instagram, in fact, instead of talking about it, Keith, I will see if I can bring it up on the screen. It might be a little tough to find, but I'll do my best to find this photo on Instagram, and I will share it with you on my second screen if I can find it quickly. There's some great photos of Walter recently. He's such a fluffy boy. Yeah, this one might be. Walter got really into ping pong recently. Yep, I found it. Okay, Keith, here we go. You're in business. Here is my shelfie. So this is @Jamey Stonemaier if you want to look at it. This is from April 19th if you want to have a closer look on your screen. And here's what my shelf looked at the time, or looked like at the time. Here's Walter emerging from the litter box as he does. He'll jump out of the litter box, and then he always just pauses and looks out the window for a few minutes. I don't know why. That's the only time that he gets up on this little ledge to look out the window. But yeah, here's my game shelf. Oh, Miles says there's a mini expansion for Let's Go to Japan that does have cities near Kyoto and Tokyo. That's cool. I don't mind that. I would love, and that's fine. And I appreciate you sharing that, Miles. I would love for there to be some other cities, maybe some northern cities, Hiroshima, although I've been to Hiroshima as well. I kind of want the cities that I haven't been to, basically, so I can think about those cities too. But that's very Jamey-centric there. I see some. Oh, Chris, this is fun from Krista. For May the 4th, we went to see A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back in a local 1950s style theater. When Leia kissed Luke in Empire Strikes Back, everyone in the theater exclaimed, "Ooh," in unison. That is fantastic, Krista. Jeff says, only able to get out once for disc golf this spring. Felt rough. The first time out is always a bit of a struggle. How about you? Am I playing much? I try to play disc golf every weekend if I can. There was a lot of rain in St. Louis this past weekend, so I didn't play this past weekend. But I do play a lot. And I do know how it feels when I haven't played in a while. Sometimes I actually come back fresh and in a good way. Like I'm not in some bad habits if I come back fresh, but also sometimes I'm just way off in terms of my disc selection and things like that. Ian also asked, how will the tariffs impact the price advantage? We're hoping to have it impact. So at least for non-US customers, it won't impact the price at all. For US customers, it might go up a little bit, but I'm hoping not more than like $5, which is not representative at all of the actual impact of the tariffs. But I'm really hoping to not have it impact the price of advantage in the US, particularly for direct sales where our margins are better. I would love, instead of, so I say this as a company that pays a lot in taxes. We pay a lot in taxes to the US government, both corporate income taxes and sales taxes. We pay like millions of dollars in taxes. I would love to not have the tariff, have to pay this additional tax to the US government for a game that we cannot make in the US. We cannot make Vantage in any way in the US. It is not possible, especially not at a price that is anywhere close to being reasonable. Vantage would cost, I would estimate actually, to make Vantage in the US would cost more than the MSRP of the game, of the current game that we're offering, the version of Vantage. So that is not possible at all to make in the US. Garrett says, how do you pay tariffs? Is it just an invoice with a payment link? I'm sure it's more complicated than that, just curious. When we are the importer of record, but importing things or shipping things, freight shipping things around the world is handled by Arc Global, our freight shipping company. And so Arc Global, they initially, well, I'll explain how I think it works. Just in general, when they receive, Arc Global gets an invoice basically from customs saying you have to pay these fees, and Arc Global pays those fees, and then we have to pay Arc Global within about a week. We have a tight turnaround for that. So I get an invoice from Arc Global for something that I think that they have already paid for using their cash reserves. So this impacts freight companies too, because they need to now have higher cash reserves to pay for the tariffs before they pass on those costs to their clients. Ivan says, I've been inspired by your legal actions against the tariff policy. So I talked with his partners at boardgamesland.com, and we're offering 3 promotional videos on our YouTube channel, plus a free web post for each publisher who wants to promote their game for free. We would love to do to promote Vantage as well. Ivan, that's very generous of you. I love the variety of ways that people in the game industry and the gaming community are coming together to try to uplift each other. And what is really a tumultuous, uncertain, difficult time with these tariffs. Whether or not you like the tariffs, that doesn't negate how difficult it is for publishers and how uncertain it is to know that it could change at any time. And so, Ivan, that's so generous of you to be offering this to publishers at this time. Thank you for doing that, for helping out in the ways that you can. I've heard as well that I've heard some other YouTube channels that are doing the same thing, or something similar, which is incredible. And he says, are there situations where tariffs are not based on the cost of goods? There seems to be some confusion with crowdfunding creators. They're based on the manufacturing cost. So, the manufacturing cost ends up on the commercial invoice, and it's the commercial invoice that is used at customs to determine the tariff, the value of the goods for the tariffs. I realize now as well that I asked about questions about tariffs for blog posts in the future, but I'm also answering them right now too. I'll try to be brief on that because these might come up in a blog post. Tim says, is the $14.50 gift card specifically for Vantage pricing, or will you make that available for all their games? It is not specifically for Vantage. It is just representative of this example that I've been using for tariffs, that every $10 that we spend on a game, a general ubiquitous game, I would say that's a good average for all of our games. All of our games on average probably cost around $10 to manufacture. That is where this gift card came from, this gift card idea. Tim's talking about, instead of us raising our prices on our web store, we're going to offer a gift card on the web store for $14.50, where if someone wants to help us offset these tariff expenses, they're welcome to pick up a gift card and simply not use it, or use it someday in the future. They're welcome to do that as well. Chad says, would you ever be interested in acquiring a game that has an IP attached to the core game mechanism? Something like Marvel DC Heroes United from CMON. It must be very different than Tokaido. It certainly gets complicated when there's an IP attached, because you're paying royalties to the IP holder as well as royalties to the designer, maybe even royalties to the artist as well. So that does certainly complicate things and makes it less appealing, honestly. Helen says, how long do you hear something or receive a response to the lawsuit? I've heard that for something like this specific lawsuit, which impacts companies right now, and impacts something that companies are enduring right now, paying these tariff taxes, it can often there's a legal term that means it can move along faster than normal. So it might be a matter of weeks, but it also might be longer. Chad also asked a similar question. When does it get rolling? Probably a matter of weeks. It has already been filed, though. I don't know Princess Awesome. I think that's a different lawsuit, though. Johnny says, how is my Blueprints playthrough going? A delightful tile placement digital game that I've been playing recently. Johnny says, my daily run has been a highlight of my evenings. I'd love to share notes and our journeys when we feel like we both finished the game. Johnny, honestly, I have been loving the game. I have put it on pause for the last few days. I tried to restrict myself to one run a day, which was fitting right with my work personal balance schedule. And I like that you're doing one run a day as well. But I found that I was, in my idle moments, I was defaulting to that instead of defaulting to doing something creative. And so, I've been trying to switch back over to the creative stuff, and that means sacrificing Blueprints in the short term. But I'm still happy to talk about it. I love talking about the game. So I look forward to chatting with you about it. Andrew says, your newsletter often contains a chart of your upcoming games and their status. It's also found on the news page of our website if anyone ever wants to see that. Many with a code name. Which of the code name items has been most on your mind lately? Andrew, one rule of code names is I don't talk about the code names. However, so I'm not going to answer specifically about that. But I will say, no, I can't answer. It's a great question, Andrew, but I'm not going to spoil anything about that. The code names are just there for fun as a teaser, and I try to leave it just at that. Frank West is here. Frank had an excellent conversation that I would highly recommend about tariffs and more on the 5 Games for Doomsday podcast. Highly recommend that. Frank says, as a non-American, I'm curious how other U.S. industries comparable to board games have responded. Most commentary I see focuses on the obvious harm to board games. Are there lessons or interesting reactions from other sectors? That's a great question, Frank. I will try to answer that in the blog post. Partially, so I've heard responses from car makers and companies that make like phones, technology, phones, laptops, things like that. Phones, laptops, they got a carve out. They got an exception. So tariffs don't even apply to them now. They were big enough to get that exception. For car makers, I saw an interesting interview with the CEO of Ford and how they're really proud that Ford has made 80% of the US, 20% of their raw materials are made elsewhere. And so tariffs do impact them, but they're hoping to not have that impact prices because so much of what they make is made in the US. But that's a great question for me to think about and try to answer in other ways in the article as well. Here we go. Hilder recommends the book Beach Read, talking about rom-com novels as one of the topics today. Rom-com novels. And let me put Beach Read. Here we go. Thank you, Hilder. I see that here. A lot of people seem to love this book, and I will send a free sample to my Kindle. Thank you for that recommendation. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And Hedge says that Escape the Green Room. This is a episode on Game Changers on Dropout TV. Escape the Green Room, Season 5, Episode 9. Okay, maybe I'll make that my next episode to watch. Season 5, make a note of that. 5.9. Thank you. Justin says there are many lawsuits against the administration at the moment. Do you have any kind? Oh, timeline. Okay, yeah, some question about timeline. Probably a couple of weeks, I think, is what we're looking at for at least some sort of a response. Andrew says your game shelf might be a good lighthearted idea for an article or video. How you organize games you keep on the shelf and other places you store games. I'm sure there are more ideas. In fact, I should mention, Andrew, I'm glad you mentioned this because I showed one of my game shelves today. I also have a Stonemaier game shelf, and I have a shelf of opportunity, and I have a shelf of smaller, lighter games. So I have a bunch of different shelves for my games. I will think, I'm trying to, for articles, I generally think, how can this article add value to other creators specifically? I don't know if I have something like that for the game shelf. I did have a post a while back about designing the sides of the box so that they appear in a good way on shelves. So I do have an article about that, but not about the exact way of organizing the shelves. So I'll have to think about that one, Andrew. I was talking about Walter popping out of the litter box. Miles says Walter just likes to survey his domain after using the litter box. I'm sure Walter does see the world as his domain. Garrett says, did you look at the Rita Orlov Ted Jigsaw Puzzle Escape Room mashup game? We decided to back it and recently picked up the latest post-curious game from our friendly local game store. Rita is awesome, incredible designer. Really, I mean, like ahead of her time designer, I believe. And I did share it with Megan. I think Megan is thinking about backing it or asking me to back it for her. It is something that Megan is the person in my life who does jigsaw puzzles. I don't do them personally, but I think Megan might enjoy them. Trishul says, did Walter take any special interest in the I Love Cats Calico or Wingspan nesting boxes or any other such boxes? Biddy was more of our box cat. My dear late Biddy that you can see on the wall behind me, he loved getting in boxes of all shapes and sizes. Walter, he likes fluffy, comfy beds. That's his thing. So I haven't seen that as much from Walter, honestly. Edward says, if you had to play a round of disc golf with only 3 discs, what would you use? I think I would use my AVR 3. It's an Innova disc. I have a few aces with it. It was made by Big Germ. I can use it. Honestly, I could use that I use it for anything under 200 feet, except for putting. I would use, I have a disc. I don't know what type of disc it is. I have a specific putter that I use. And for my driver, I would use the Stonemaier Games Brute. I really like the Brute, which I believe, I forget the real name of it. Whatever the Brute disc that we make at Stonemaier Games, that is, it's our Libertalia disc. I can throw that disc pretty well. And I can do a couple different shot shapes with it. Yeah, that would probably be my 3. What about you, Edward? If you could only choose 3 discs, what disc would you choose? For those of you who don't play disc golf, those are 3 discs. There's a putter that I use for short range. Big Germ, the AVR 3 is one that I use for mid-range shots. And then the Brute is one that I use for longer distance shots. Mark has a lot of Game Changer episodes, including, if I'm going back in time, a lot of recommendations. I'll have to leave this. I will be able to see these comments later, so I will go back and look at it then. Hedge says, how much of an impact do manufacturing costs have on the game design process? And this is a fantastic question, actually, because a lot, especially if you are someone like me who designs games, develops games, and is the publisher of those games. I think about the manufacturing cost and other things like that, other product design elements from the very start. So having uncertainty with tariffs really complicates that process. It complicates my ability to plan ahead. Like, I start getting estimates from Panda very early on about our games. I really need to plan ahead for costs. And so while I certainly don't want tariffs to remain 145%, I would love some certainty for them, for them to just, if there are going to be tariffs, I would love to know what they are going to be for a long time so I can plan ahead for what those costs might look like. Yeah, that's that level of the uncertainty. And Frank actually talks about this really well on the 5 Games for Doomsday podcast. He talks about that in terms of what if you didn't know your salary from week to week? What if one week your salary was twice what it was last week, and the next week it's only 60% of what it was this week? What if your salary changed every week? How much uncertainty that would throw into your life. That would be really, really difficult. Mike says, do you think a physical version of Blueprints, this tile placement, it's much more than tile placement, but it is also a tile placement game, would be viable as a board game? It feels like something that could be fun with randomized decks for rooms, items, etc. The challenge, Mike, I think it has the potential of being a board game, combining what I love about Time Stories that I built into Vantage, this first-person perspective element, combined with a tile placement top-down view. Combine those 2 things. That's really cool. I think the challenge is that Blueprints and many digital games are built to be solo experiences. I think it might be tough to also make it a cooperative game. However, there are 2 games that I think are worth playing that are very similar to or not similar. They echo elements of Blueprints. Betrayal Legacy is one that I would recommend. I think it actually does a lot of things that Blueprints does. And Endeavor Deep Sea is a tile placement game where there are very different mini games on each of the tiles in Endeavor Deep Sea. So if you like Blueprints, I'd recommend either of those tabletop games. Oh, awesome. Julie also recommend. Julie, that was the book that started this conversation, The Rom-Commers by Catherine Center. Thank you for mentioning the author there as well. That's the book that I just finished and was delighted by it and really opened me to trying more rom-com novels. Okay, let's see. I'm going to post. Do I have any more questions? I do have. I asked about game nights, and then I asked about tariffs. Okay, yeah. I think I have. Actually, no, I do have one other question that I want to throw out there. Oh no, I ran out of time again. I will save that one for next week. I will probably do your questions for the rest. Actually, no, I want to show one other fun thing before I move forward with the rest of your questions. A few quick things that are just for fun. I saw the Thunderbolts movie last night, the new Marvel movie. It was delightful. Really funny, good action, fun premise. Or not fun premise, but somewhat unique premise, I thought, compared to other superhero movies. We had our cookbook club this past weekend where we pick a cookbook and we each pick a recipe out of that cookbook to make. And I made a galette for the first time. I made a broccoli cheddar galette. And there are definitely some things that I would do better next time or do differently next time, but overall I enjoyed it, enjoyed trying to make it. And my video from this past weekend was about 30 games that break the rules. So they kind of go against common conventions in games, design conventions. The one thing I wanted to show you real quick before I just focus on questions is, let me pull this up on the screen, big screen. Here we go. So I recently heard, long story short, I heard from a class of elementary school students. I think I heard from a friend of the teacher. I didn't even hear from the teacher initially. And the teacher loves Wingspan and has brought Wingspan in the classroom to share with the students and talk about birds with the students. And I filmed a short video to this classroom, just thanking them and thanking the teacher for playing Wingspan. And I decided to throw a challenge at them. I threw two challenges. I said, one, I would love for you all as a class to design a bird together. Design a bird that isn't in Wingspan, design a bird card. And I just want to see what it looks like. I want to see what you create, just as a fun classroom challenge. And also, if any of you want to go home or in class and illustrate a bird from Wingspan, your favorite bird, then I would love to see your creations. And so really quickly, I would like to share with you the illustrations created by Miss Lloyd's class. I don't know how old, second grade. This is a second grade class in Arkansas, Miss Lloyd's class. Here are their illustrations, and I'll also show you the bird that they designed. So I'm going to show you my other screen here. Oh, there's my Amazon screen. I'm on the wrong screen. Here we go. I need to add a different screen. Okay, here is the correct screen right here. Here we go. Here's a toucan. I'll just go through them. Here's a falcon. Oh, you can see who the students are too. Billy, here is from Jackson. Here's a bald eagle. Here is the card they designed, the brown thrasher. The brown thrasher. I'll pause on that for a second so you can check it out. Here's another illustration of the brown thrasher. Scarlet macaw from Phelan. Here's the cedar waxwing from Abigail. Here is the blue-footed booby, I believe. A female belted kingfisher by Max. Kiwi from Abigail. An Atlantic puffin from Phelan. Yeah, I just thought that was absolutely delightful. Thank you to everyone in Miss Lloyd's class for illustrating these birds and for creating the brown thrasher. I love your creativity. I think that was really, really delightful. Okay, Trishul says he just played Red Rising for the first time and his friends loved it. Darrow, however, was banished very early. Were there design considerations made to bring the protagonist back into the game? After a banishing? There are some cards. There is a card that I think can bring a banished card back. I think it's one of the yellow cards, one of the their colors in Red Rising. Maybe the Surgeon, perhaps. Actually, that might have also been a purple card. One of the two is either purple or yellow. Cassandra says, I wish more publishers would use standard box sizes and just adjust how deep they need to be. Any thoughts on that? Cassandra, well, I would counter that a little bit to say that there is really no such thing as a standard box size. However, there are certain box sizes that have come to be known as somewhat standard, kind of the Ticket to Ride Wingspan box size. And what you describe is an approach that we have generally used at Stonemaier Games over the last few years, where we use the same box size like Finspan. I think Finspan is like a few millimeters less deep than Wingspan, but it's pretty close. But to have that box size, so they're pretty consistent on the shelf. The other counter to that, though, is that if a game doesn't need that much box size, that is better, I think, in general, for it to fit into a smaller box. It costs less to freight ship. It costs less for you to ship. It takes up less space on your shelf. And so I wouldn't say there are as standard of box sizes for smaller boxes. Now, if you look at any game shelf, I'm looking at my shelf, I can probably find some smaller box sizes that have been used more often than others. I think that is good to look at as a publisher as you're considering box sizes. But one of the great things about working with the talented factories in China is that they have a lot of flexibility. They can make any box size that you want. But consider, I hear you about that there is value in having consistently sized boxes as long as that size is the right size for the components in the box. Jordan says, what do you think about the second Red Rising trilogy? That will be maybe 4 books in the end, maybe even 5. Who knows how many books the second series will be. Yeah, I'm hoping Red God is just 1 book. I love it. In fact, I would say that book 6 is very close to being my top favorite book of the series. I think book 1 is still takes the cake for me, but book 6 was really, really good in the Red Rising series, in my opinion. I really, really enjoyed it. Paul has a bunch of different answers for his 3 discs that he would choose if he had to choose 3 different discs to play disc golf with. Oh, here Clayton found that the Brute is a beast. The Beast is the original Innova name for the disc. The Stonemaier name for it is the Brute, tied to Libertalia. But yeah, thank you for looking that up, Clayton. I appreciate that. Mark says, is there a specific mechanism or theme that you think Stonemaier is missing from your offering that you'd like to make? There certainly are both of them. Yeah, I would say both. I don't want to name it out loud right now because I think we actually have games with these themes and mechanisms in the works right now. But if, for example, you look at my recent video about my favorite mechanisms, you will probably see some of those mechanisms that haven't made their way into Stonemaier Games, but I would like them to do that someday. I see a few people picking their favorite 3 disc golf discs. That's fun. Justin says, what's your favorite terrain for a disc golf hole? Have you brainstormed any disc golf board game ideas? Favorite terrain is really a mix. My favorite courses are those that have a mix of like shorter, tighter shots with also some more wide open, but with some trees, some obstacles, and then a few that are just completely wide open. I like the mix of, I like the courses that have a mix of the 3. And as for a disc golf board game, I consider disc golf to be the game that I want for disc golf. Like if I'm going to play a board game that is even a little bit connected to disc golf, it would probably be Crokinole. I'd probably play that on the tabletop. Chris has a recommendation here as well for funny stories. So Emily Henry, it looks like Emily Henry is the author for rom-coms. Funny story. I'll look that up here. Okay, yeah. That looks cute. I'm just looking at the cover here. But yeah, thank you for that recommendation. Hilda's go-tos are the Mako 3, a Nuke, and the Green Gully putter. Green Gully used to be my putter, and I still do use that from time to time, but I found another putter that's a little bit stickier for me. Okay, Julie's other recommendations are Hello Stranger. I think I had that on my list, and her new book, The Love Haters. Oh, there's a new one. Okay, Love Haters. New book from the author of The Rom-Commers, which I very recently that I enjoyed. Love Haters hasn't come out yet, it looks like, but I could pre-order it. I'll have to look to see. I wish I could read the sample before pre-ordering, especially for a book that comes out in just a few weeks. But otherwise, I mark my calendar to check out the sample in the future. Nick, I have read The Poppy Wars, and I really enjoyed that book. That's an intense book, but I did really enjoy that. Okay, let's see if I can get a few more questions in here before the end, and I'll save tariff questions for the article. I do see some tariff questions. Ahmed says, I have played recently 3 games that contain rotation structures boards that affect the game dramatically. Age of Rome, Fromage, and Ryozen. What do you think about this mechanism? Is it something you would like to include in your games? And I'd add Planet Unknown to that as well. Planet Unknown, one of my favorite games that uses a rondelle like this. I think it is a really clever mechanism for simultaneous play in particular. I don't know Ryozen or Age of Rome, but I know Fromage, simultaneous play. I think that having something rotating in the center where players are interacting with different things in the middle at different times, I think is really clever. I would love to play around with that mechanism. In fact, you saying that might have helped me with a game that I'm working on right now. Yeah, so thank you for suggesting that. The only challenge with it is that it doesn't always scale great for different player counts. And I need our games to scale well for all different player counts. But I want to think about that. Yeah, thank you for that idea. And I'm going to make a note about that right here on a game that I'm working on. Let's see. Oh, this is cool. Chad says that Sidney Crosby, famous hockey player, loves birds and regularly identifies them. Wonder if he has wingspan. Maybe Sidney Crosby does. Oh, Gloria's popping in just to say that I love your games. Thank you so much, Gloria. That's so kind of you to say. It means a lot when people say that. So I appreciate that you've connected with our games and that you found joy in them. Austin says, do you ever design games with an expansion already in mind? Do you recommend other designers do the same, or do you like to hear such thoughts when taking on a new game to publish? Good question, Austin. So in general, no. When I design a game, I try to put everything that I have into that game. All the good ideas, I try to put them in the game. Not just good ideas, but the things that work, I try to put them in the game. Everything else, I cut. If it isn't adding more fun to the game, I cut it. And I don't cut it with the intent of adding it in the future either. So in terms of submissions, when someone comes to me and talks to me about a game, and I would say initially focusing on how expandable a game is not something that is a good selling point for me. I want to be hooked on other elements of the game. I want to be hooked on how good the game is by itself before you start to sell me in other elements. And very recently, we did have a game submitted to us that we did pass on it, but it was a tough consideration because it was a really, really good game. It is a really, really good game. And after I was sold on the game, the designer did mention the possibility for how expansions could look or how the game could even grow in the core box. And that was a great selling point after that, because I'd already been hooked on what the game was. Yeah, but for me as a designer, I often don't think about expansions at all until the game is very successful, and if it is successful and does well, that's when I start to think about it. Because I don't want to get ahead of myself too, because a game might not be as successful as I hoped it would be, and then I've left some of the best stuff. Why would I leave some of the best stuff? Maybe that's the reason why the game isn't successful in the first place. So yeah, I don't think about expansions until later. Let's see. Curve Cut says, will the solo mode for Euphoria be available at any time in the future, not on the web store? The solo mode for Euphoria is part of the expansion, the Ignorance is Bliss expansion. So that is the only way that you can get the solo mode for Euphoria. If Ignorance is Bliss is out of stock where you are, then it will likely be in stock in the future for you to get in that way. Yeah. But that is the way to get it. You got to get Ignorance is Bliss. And I think I'm guessing that you can probably find Ignorance is Bliss somewhere. If your local store doesn't have it, they can probably order it. All right, I think I'm a little over time today, but that's the glory of doing these things live. I can spend extra time on them if I want. I'll end with a nice comment here from Stuart. Stuart says, my wife and I recently invited one of her coworkers to game with us. She's come over now twice, and we let her pick any game off the shelf. We have around 60, and both games that drew her in were Stonemaier titles. So you're batting 2 for 2. Talking about like the appeal of the side of the box on the shelf. That really matters. And Stuart, I want to highlight this because I think it is wonderful that you invited someone into your home to play games with you who maybe hadn't played games before, or maybe she had played a bunch of games before. Not sure. But I love the invitation. I love people actively welcoming others into the hobby. I think that's awesome. So Stuart, thank you for doing that. And I hope to continue to do that for my game nights as well, because I love to host game nights. I love to expose new people to the games that I love sharing and playing. So thank you all for the conversation today about game night snacks, about Dropout TV, about rom-com books. We talked about a lot today. I got a lot out of this conversation, and I will go through the comments and look back for ideas for snacks and rom-coms and tariff questions. I appreciate that too. I hope you have a great day, a great week, and I will see you next Wednesday. Take care.